We're finally getting close to finishing this BRZ build. If you weren't with us when we started, we bought this BRZ crashed at auction for $5,000, just a little over $5,000. And we're gonna make it look like this. This is a rendering from John Sybil, and the second I saw this rendering, I knew I had to build this car. So I reached out to him, I asked his permission. He granted us permission to build it, hence why we're here. But before we're ready to move on to the paint section of this build, we've got some of the hardest, most technical work to do left on the build. We have created hood scoops out of plastic. We need to create these for real out of fiberglass and mount them onto the hood. I say these, it's actually a that, it. It's an it. Singular scoopage. The wide body kit needs to be flush mounted into the body, so it will look like it comes right off the body, maybe like it even came from factory that way, rather than looking like it has a body kit bolted onto it. And the rear bumper is still basically split in half, so we gotta fix that. But if we can get this all done, then the car is ready for paint. That's the goal. Let's get to work. I don't know if our body filler is special or if the body filler has just gotten better these days, but on the recommended application, it says you can go up to 3/4 of an inch thick. I don't like to do that. I'm kind of the old school side of where you don't go over a 1/4 inch thick. If you need to go over a 1/4 inch thick, you need to use fiberglass reinforced body filler underneath so you get that base shape, and then you go over it with body filler. Luckily, on these over fenders, we don't gotta worry about that. We're within that 1/4 inch range. Finding that transition between your body kit and the rest of your body, that's an artistic, you have to take your own approach to that and find what you think looks best. There's no one size fits all answer for that, so we're gonna be trying to just feel out, you know, what that good transition is, and each part is different. Like this part's gonna be much more vertical, where this part is gonna be kind of sailing up and going more horizontal. And that's just an artistic outlook that we have to put on this thing and figure it out. But the basics of applying the body filler are very simple. You want to clean, sand, scuff, make sure that the body filler has something to stick to on your fiberglass and on your paint, which means scuffing it up. And then you lay it up and start sanding it until it looks right. You're sculpting, baby. That's what the first round of body filler is looking like. We're kind of like laying the foundation. Some of this vertically did not want to go up, so you can still see well, it's very hard to see these things on camera, but it's going up and then in a little bit, and then we're going up. So we're just kind of laying the foundation, then we'll come back over and continue so we can get that nice flow from this body line all the way up so it looks completely smooth. Some of these are starting to get there around here, but you can see it's that one, foundational. We went down foundational, but we're definitely not, like, we'll sand this a little bit to get the high spots down, and then we'll have to do another round of body fill over it. We're gonna jump into the side skirts now. Side skirts are looking pretty good. It's just, there is this little channel right here where this fiberglass piece didn't quite meet up with the plastic OEM piece. So we'll pop the screws out. We're gonna lay a piece of tape that helps us not get body filler up on this edge where we don't want it. And then we're just trying to fill, let me get that out of there, this little channel right here so that we have this perfect transition from fiberglass into this piece. And then I gotta fill these little holes as well. With the side skirt gap now filled in, this has had time to dry. We're gonna go ahead and hit this with a sander and knock down awkward high spots like some of this, some of these. Just knock these down and then do our second coat. Now that we got that body filler in and dry, it's time to move on to the fun part. We're gonna be creating a hood scoop. But before we can do that, we gotta create a hood scoop mold. And to do that, I'm gonna be using my brand new Bamboo X1 Carbon 3D printer. I wanna give a shout out to Bamboo for sponsoring today's episode and for sending me their X1 Carbon 3D printer. This thing has been a total game changer for my custom work. The X1C is fully enclosed, so I can print durable, strong materials that'll actually hold up to the use. It's got LiDAR scanning for that next level accuracy, so when I'm printing molds or sanding tools, they fit right the first time. As you can see, it's also insanely fast, printing it up to 500 millimeters per second. and it still keeps perfect detail. Plus it's got auto calibration, a flexible build plate to pop parts off easily, a filament runout sensor so you don't waste print, and their AMS system for multi-material and multicolored prints if you want to get fancy. Let me show you what I've been using it for to knock out some of these critical parts for the BRZ. First up is the mold for the custom hood scoop. Yes, these 6 pieces do make up the mold, we just have to put them together. Instead of shaping it from scratch, I designed it, I printed it, and I got the perfect base to start from. It's rock solid, and because of the X1C's precision, I don't need to fight to get it into the right shape. Next up is the custom sanding blocks to match all the tricky curves on this wide body kit. Instead of hours of struggling with foam and tape, I just print the exact shape I need and I can get to work. And beyond that, I've printed clips for aligning panels, spacers for consistent gaps, different clamps, and even ergonomic sanding grips. So whether you're into car builds or custom parts or really any kind of hands-on projects, the Bambu X1C printer will really help level up your game. So head to my link in the description, go to Bambu's website and check out the X1C and also all the other printers and filaments and accessories they've got. They've got something to fit each person's needs. So go give it a look. The link is in the description. Big shout out to Bambu. Thank you so much for sponsoring this episode. So these 6 pieces right here actually, when attached together, make up the mold for our hood scoop. So that's the first step. Kyle and I are gonna process these and attach them all together. Since we're going to be trying to work with this today, one big thing to keep in mind, you don't want to use glue if you're trying to body work it really fast. Plastic welding is going to go better because plastic can sand. Glue, if it doesn't dry up as hard as your body filler, is going to create gunk in there. It's going to be really tough. So we're gonna get this together and you'll be able to see the shape of the mold. So we've 3D printed plastic parts before and created molds from them, but this time we're trying something new, which is 3D printing the mold and then just laying fiberglass into that to create the actual part. So I designed this mold to have a very flat base. So hopefully we just put everything on this perfectly flat welding table, snug up all the corners, and then we're gonna go ahead and use these plastic welders to plastic weld them together on the front and the back. Then to smooth out our plastic welding marks, we're gonna lay in around a body filler and quickly sand this up whilst also sanding out any of the protruding layer line. Once that's fully sanded and smooth, like any mold, you're gonna go ahead and apply 3 rounds of wax. So a little wax on and wax off. That's mold release wax. And then we're gonna go ahead and brush on some PVA. PVA is a mold release film. And then after that, it is 3 rounds of the double thick fiberglass and resin. And then we let it to set up overnight. All right, guys, it is the next day and we had a little mistake. We went a little too fast. We pushed the pace a little too much and it caused a little mistake, but I believe we have salvaged it. There's a learning, what's that called? Like, not like a learning lesson because that's repetitive. Learning moment here. Let me explain. So here's our mold. It's still 100% strong, which is great. We can reuse this, and if we have to remake the part, it's ready to roll. Well, it needs a lot of cleaning, but other than that, it's ready to roll. Here's the mistakes that we made. We waxed it. That's good. We didn't leave the wax enough time to dry. That's bad. Then we put PVA over it. That's not great because it then mixed with the wax. Then we didn't even know if that would ever dry because wax isn't really a dry thing and PVA does air dry. So we probably should have gave that a lot of time. So that's like 2 mistakes. Then we put resin over the PVA and it created a wax PVA resin slurry. We knew we were pushing our luck at that point, but we went ahead with the layup anyways. Then the other thing is you can see these like little crusties here. This is fumed silica mixed with fiberglass. This is really good to help make sure your part gets all the way into the hard to reach places, like in the little corners and stuff here. But something went wrong with the fumed silica and it didn't want to bond to our fiberglass and resin, which has never happened to us before. And honestly, I don't know the reason that that happened other than we did it kind of as an afterthought. We put the resin and fiberglass down, then we peeled it up and put the fumed silica stuff in there. And that might have meant that we got PVA and wax on our fiberglass cloth and everything. So I came in here yesterday and I popped the piece out of the mold and the top was gummy and gunky and not dry. I then placed it under our wonderful infrared heat lamp overnight, risked burning the shop down once more. And luckily, when we come in today, it is hard. It's all hardened up. The downside is because this top layer wasn't totally hard, we got a little bit of rippling in the top layer where it is not fused to the bottom layer and it's not perfectly flat. A little bit here, little bit here, because basically this was dry when I pulled it out of the mold and it just like suctioned back and it just didn't go back down. All this is good, all this is hard. So the piece is salvageable totally. It just means that we're gonna have to sand through this layer, make it nice and flat, and then we can body fill over it. Luckily, because we did such hardcore, I mean, you can look at the amount of fiberglass that's right there. We did a really, really hardcore, thick 3 layers. This thing is super strong and it is a good base to work with. It's just gonna add a little bit more finish time for us. Well, I started working this piece and unfortunately it cannot be saved. There's too much delamination, that the top layer not laminating to the next layer. You can see how I could push this whole area down. And I was gonna try and sand all this off, but because it's so flexible, it won't sand off. And I have that happening here, here, a lot of weird stuff. You can see how it's all bubbly back there. And then I guess most important failure point is that we're delaminated all the way across the front. This material that we're using, although it's really, really good, and we made some killer body parts out of it before, it's really thick. It's got a lot of body to it. Sorry, the camera having a little trouble focusing. But anyways, you can see it's separated all the way across. And I mean, we could resin it back together, but I just think that given that we have all these problems, it's gonna be better to take a clean second try at this thing. This is what we do. We try things, we learn things. Sometimes it takes multiple tries. Now, the good part about this is that the mold is, although slightly gunky, it's still in the right shape. So I'm gonna do some tests with a few different chemical types to see what is okay to use to clean the gunk off of this mold with. And once I get it figured out, we will go ahead and clean the mold really well and then give it its proper time to go through its paces. Wax on, wax off, right? 3 times, wax on, wax off, then PVA, then we'll let the PVA dry thoroughly, and we're going to lay down chopped strand mat rather than using the double weave mat to try and make sure that we're getting in all these crevices. And then I think we're going to also vacuum bag it. So we're throwing everything that we know at this thing to try and make it work. All right, we've got this thing completely cleaned up. Then we hit it with wax, and then we hit it with PVA. Excuse the noise. Got Formula One practice on in the background. Brand new season, just firing up. So now we're gonna go ahead and lay down our resin, our chop strand mat, 3 layers. Then we'll vacuum bag it overnight. See how it goes tomorrow. Hopefully a lot better. We are back. It's the next day. My face got so full of fiberglass from yesterday, like it is in pain. And that pain is not about to end because we've got a lot more fiberglass work to continue doing today. I'm excited to see what this thing is gonna look like. Let's pop it out of the mold and see what we got. It's pretty dang good. It's a little bit, it's a step away from perfect. So as you can see, like in the middle here, we've got that nice hard, you can hear my fingernails bouncing off of it. Over here, we've got a little bit of resin. It's kind of tough to narrow down what these things could be because on the mold we had wax, then we had PVA, and then you put resin over that. This feels like resin that's just barely not cured. Now that could be caused by the temperatures in the shop. We ran the heater overnight, but it is only 60 degrees in here, and overnight it was probably even colder, which is not recommended for this resin. You want to be over 70 degrees. So that could be a little bit of uncured resin, or it could be some of that wax PVA that's causing some sort of a weird reaction or something. It's not everywhere on this panel, and the panel overall, I mean, the quality and the smoothness and everything is like so much better than the last one. Definitely an upgrade, but I'm guessing this is a little bit of uncured resin. It makes sense. It's on the very, very bottom layer. I think that's the issue that we had. So we're gonna throw this thing under the heat lamp. That's kind of been our go-to for trying to cure this resin up. So we're gonna throw this thing under the heat lamp and cook it a little bit, and then hopefully that resin will harden really nice so it can get into a good, whoa, where am I going? So down it goes into the baking station, and hopefully that'll finish the cure process on that resin, and we will let you know how that looks in an hour or so. I think it's gonna be just fine. Seems like all the fun stuff like painting cars, building fiberglass parts, few other things. There's a lot of like technical windows you want to land within, and Oregon, you guys know the weather here is like crazy. So last night it got down to almost freezing, but it's also super, super high humidity as well. So we just have to play these games and learn through these things the best we can. If we did that in the summer, I really don't think we'd have a problem right now. So just a learning lesson. I apologize because these are very nuanced things, and they're going to be a little bit hard to show on camera, so you might have to use your imagination a little bit. But basically, when you imagine this panel, how it would come from the factory, it would be a slope, and it would slope from down here and slope out to our body kit. Because the body kit has some thickness to it and some buildup, it creates a high spot right here. And although that looks great visually when you're bolting on the body kit, when you're blending it, what's happening is we're getting a little bit of this with a little bit of a raised section right here. So a little bit raised right here, and then it swoops in to there. So that kind of creates a swoop down with a little bit of a bump and then a swoop again. That's not how it would look from the factory ever. And the goal, like I said, was to get this to look like it came out of the factory that way. So sometimes you get in this kind of loop where you put body filler on. You can see we put so much on and sanded, turned it all into dust, and ended up with just this tiny little bit left here. And you kind of end up in this loop where you keep trying something and then sand it, and it doesn't work, and try it, sand it, doesn't work. And the more you do that, honestly, too, the more likely you are to get kind of uneven, wavy panels. We don't want to do that. So we decided to build our own tool that will act as a guide. Kyle, where'd I put that over here? So we created this. Now this is basically just a body filler spreader mega. So like I said, this is gonna start setting our arc. And when we start looking at spots, we're gonna be able to see where our high spots are, see where our low spots are, and how we need to get this to come through. And we can put a little bit of flex in it, and then we can run it through here. And we'll start to be able to set this thing very uniformly. So you can see right here, we're pretty much closed up and perfect. But as we work back here, we need a lot more body fill right where the current body fill right now transitions into paint. So this is going to be our tool, our guide to work us from back here. It's pretty much flat, so that's great. And then the car opens up, and the bend and the flex opens up, and we're going to be able to wipe right through there and hopefully follow this. This is our guide, our template, and our spreader all at one. And my hope is not only will it get a great, smooth, perfectly good curve into transitioning into our body kit, but it'll help us from chasing individual spots all over the place and creating like different wavies and things like that. Working body filler on cars and working transitions and creating custom shapes is an art. And I know the guys that do it all day long. A lot of you watch this show and you guys are masters at it. But as we're learning, I think that's really going to help. So Kyle's going to work on these transitions, continue to work on the transitions in the quarter panel. I'm going to get the first layer of work done on the hood scoop and show you kind of what I did to start smoothing that out. Luckily, the issue that we had earlier with the stickiness, that was just resin that hadn't had enough time and heat to dry. So we put it under the heat lamp, and within like an hour, hour and a half, this is all hardened up perfectly. So this is sandable, dried resin. These were some of the worry points, and it's good. You can hear it. Fingernail test. So the cool thing about this part is, unlike the other one, this one is super, super smooth. It's got a little bit of the layer lines in it from the 3D print, but nothing too bad. So I'm gonna trim this. I'm gonna be trimming the edges, and I'm gonna trim it to fit on the car. And then I'm gonna go straight into what we would normally do is a bit of like what we'd call like a skim coat, a body fill. It's not really necessary on this because it's super uniform and it's super smooth. So I'm gonna go right into, this is a polyester primer, and it's like a super, super thick high fill primer. So it's like a middle part between like a glazing putty and a primer. And I'm gonna roll it on. So the texture's not gonna be super perfect, but I'm gonna get good coverage. And then I can block sand this thing very easily. And that'll be our finished surface on this. That'll be really, really glassy smooth. So let's get it trimmed up, and then I can get it coated. I realize it might not look like it, but this is almost done. And same over here. Check out that profile as I go up and down. It's smooth, baby. So it's kind of a combination of three things. One was getting a little bit more coverage on the body kit and on the panel. Another was kind of vertically bringing it down so we could feel that curvature of the panel. And then thirdly was hand sanding with the sanding blocks. This nice flexible block right here and this big guy right here really helped us keep that curve and keep everything straight so there's no wobbling going in between these. These are gonna look really, really good. I'm very proud of how these are turning out. So this last round of body fill that you saw, this is us just covering a little bit of low spots here and there. Once those are sanded up, this is gonna be ready for primer. The trim up went really, really well. I got a really good fit around like the hood and the hood profile and everything like that. I'm very happy with how this went overall. I think it proves out that creating a basically expected to be one-time use, maybe two-time, maybe three-time use mold from plastic is a working solution. And I went hard with this high fill primer. I mean, I pretty much just soaked it on there. So we have a lot of primer that we can go into if we need it. The only bad side is I used one of these types of rollers. Let me see if I can find a clean one here. There. I think this is called high nap or something like that. I don't know a lot about these rollers. Anyways, I think a high density foam roller would have been better because a few of these little fuzzy bits landed in the piece and I just left them there. I probably should have fished them out and coated over it. I left them there and I am a little worried about those kind of sinking all the way down to the bottom to touch the fiberglass. So when I go and sand, it's kind of always going to be a rough spot. I'm a little worried about that, but I will let you know how it goes. So next up is grabbing a big old, well, first is charcoal. This is guide coat. You put charcoal over the entire thing. That way when you start to sand, you'll sand off all the high points of the charcoal and it will show you the low points. So you make sure that you're sanding uniformly across the panel. And I'm going to be using the biggest sanding block I have so I can get these big straight lines to make sure, because this is a relatively pretty straight panel. So it should sand up fast. And once I have it all evened out, all the high spots knocked down, we should get a really, really flat, really good looking surface. So I'm gonna be hand sanding this thing up and get it all nice and flat with 200. And then if it's all looking great, I'll grab another block and I'll hit it with 400. If I have 300, I'll do that in between, but then I'm gonna be finishing it with 400. All right, milestone time. The hood scoop is ready to roll. That thing is sanded up to 400 grit and smooth as butter. We've got a few things left to do on that before it's ready to mount. The other big milestone is the quarter panels are done. Those are completely smooth and we got that transition perfect. We will hit that all with a coat of high fill primer. It's our best way of visibly verifying that everything looks smooth and perfect and lets us sand out any scratches or anything that we put in there. So those are ready for high fill, but we're gonna focus back on this hood scoop. Now, before we mount it, we're gonna go ahead and paint the front inside. In case you were to see a shot like this, that should be black. So we're gonna go ahead and paint like this whole front underneath section of the hood scoop black, and then we're gonna cut a hole in our hood for the air that we scoop to go in underneath there. Now this is a 2-layer hood. It's fiberglass and carbon fiber composite hood, and it's got a structural layer underneath this. We only want to cut through the top layer, so I'm going to be very, very careful when I cut it. And basically to cut it, what I'm going to do is use some tape to tape off my square so I know where my zone is, and I'm going to be cutting kind of back here, this area out of the hood. With the hole cut in the hood and the hood scoop now panel bonded on here, this thing ain't going anywhere. This thing's on here, and now we got to start working on kind of flushing it in or working it into the rest of the hood. So what I like to do is I just start looking around the shop for things that have different radius, different little circular objects, and start looking at where the hood scoop meets the hood and what type of a radius I want to use. Now I was looking around, and this is a vacuum plug hose for our vacuum pump on our resin, but I looked at it against this and I look at the little gap that it creates, and I was thinking, that's pretty good, but it's a little bit small. So I took my digital calipers and I measured the diameter of this, and let's head back to my house, and I am going to 3D model and create 2 different brand new tools that we're gonna be able to use to flush this thing in. So like I said, we're gonna be building 2 tools here. The first one is a spreader that has the correct radius that I want for the car. So I know my radius is 42 millimeters, so I'm gonna go ahead and create a little cylinder here and then just modify it by stretching it horizontally and stretching it a little bit vertically. And that looks like a spreader with 42 millimeter rounded edges. So I'll throw it into the bamboo slicer software, and I'm just gonna make one change and make it a little bit thinner so we don't waste any print time. And then I'm gonna go ahead and duplicate it and send it off to the printer. While that's printing, I'm gonna start working on my sanding block. Now my sanding block is a cylinder, again, 42 millimeter diameter, but I only need half of it. I don't need the whole thing. So I'm just gonna go ahead and cut this thing in half. And then again, I can send that over into the bamboo software, slice that thing up, and send it off to the printer. And thanks to that bamboo printer, we have got our 2 new tools that are gonna help us flush this thing in perfectly. So I got my radius exactly how I want it based on the measurements and just kind of real life checking. I put that radius on all 4 corners. And what this is basically, it's a perfect radius spreader. So now I can take this and I can come in, and when I'm applying my, be it fiberglass reinforced body filler or my body filler, when I do my wipe through here, this is gonna set the perfect radius that I need to have this thing meet the car exactly how I want it, all the way down the line. Then, when it comes time to sand that all smooth, I created some, again, perfect radius, the exact same matching radius as that, sanding blocks. So when I put these in here, I can work and I can sand this right down and through all the way through there. And radius sanding blocks like this that are the perfect radius to get that perfect transition are pretty much the only way that you're gonna have this look smooth and go glassy right back through there. If you try and do it by hand, you're gonna have wobblies that go this way all the way through. So you have to use a sanding block, and it's great to just pick a radius that you like and stick with that. The first layer that I lay down, I want to be fiberglass reinforced body filler, just because it's gonna make it even stronger. Even though this panel bond is really, really strong, why not use something that's as strong as you got? So I'll do one that's a little bit low, and I'll work that through there, and then I'll do the full high radius one with some body filler. Oh, but when you're doing this too, go ahead, do yourself a favor, mark your radius, mark where it starts and it stops across here, and lay down some tape at your flat here and your flat here. That way when you put down the whatever it may be, fiberglass reinforced body filler or just body filler, you're gonna swipe it through here and it's gonna get on the flat. Well, you don't wanna spend a bunch of time sanding the flats of these 2 things. And if you have that tape down there perfectly, you know when it peaks on both of the radiuses. So for what I'm talking about is you can see right where that piece of plastic meets on the hood scoop and where it meets on the car. Just put a piece of tape right there on both sides. That way you just peel that tape right off and your flat will stay flat and you don't have to sand it flat again. Okay, so the green stuff went down. Now that's the fiberglass reinforced body filler. You can see it here on the spreader there. Laid that in and then flipped it over here, and I kept my radius edge right here, and that's the body fill on top of it. And that radius matches up with my sanding block radius exactly the same right here. So now I could start sanding in, and it's just this game right here, and you can start seeing your marks. You can use guide coat. I pulled that tape, as you can see, so it's lifted up, and basically what we want to be doing is sanding off until it's flat there and it's flat there, and then we know we got this perfect arc. And that is with all the wide body kits I've installed, all the different things and aftermarket parts that I've installed, where you got to transition and almost do like a 90-degree edge, and you want to have a nice radius to it. This is a way to make it look absolutely the best. So because of the sanding block, this becomes a pretty easy process of just working this through. And then you know, you can see where it's changing from the dark blue that's untouched to the lighter blue, the scratch surface color. Using the guide coat and the charcoal will only make this even better. So once I got all the high spots off of this, you'll see me put on some guide coat, and then that'll tell me if I've sanded everything. Once everything's been sanded to this radius, I know it's this radius. And then you just work on getting all the low grit sandpaper scratches out. After a short sanding session, Kyle and I kind of realized that I think the tape lines were actually kind of a bad idea. It didn't allow us to feather the edges on both ways quite enough. So although I was trying to be more efficient, I don't think that's the way to go. So we took the tape lines off, and then we had to put in more body fill, almost like redoing the body filler layer once again. So that's just something I learned. And while that's drying up, we're gonna move on to the last piece that really needs to be worked out, and that is this rear bumper cover. Originally, I planned on just buying a replacement for this, right? Like, it's a BRZ bumper, how bad could it be? Turns out they're pretty expensive online. I mean, some of the used ones I found were like 400 plus shipping, so I mean like $600, and that seems like a lot. And I believe that a crack like this is fixable. So we're gonna go ahead and try and fix it. We're gonna get this bumper off, inspect the amount of damage, and pull out our plastic working tools and see what we can do. Now that we've got the bumper off, we were able to inspect it a little bit and see what it's gonna take to push these two pieces back together. Although with it just sitting here, it almost looks like it's gonna be real easy. The bottom part is really forcing us out from closing this gap, and that's because that's a part that's, you know, it's not really fractured, and there's a lot of material here, extra material, and it's kind of trying to force itself back together, and it's creating this squeezing issue, and it's holding us out. So what we're gonna go ahead and do is cut into this line a little bit and kind of essentially finish the crack and leave a little gap, so, and a stopping point. Some people drill a little hole, so hopefully that'll stop the crack from ever wanting to continue, although I don't know if that theory applies to plastics. It's gonna give us the amount of room that we need to force this crack back together, because although it really looks really close, it's actually pretty tough. It takes a lot of force to hold this crack back together. And once we get it together, the easiest part to hold together is the top. That doesn't take a lot of force. So we're gonna start on the top and then we'll work our way down. And we've never done this before, but this is what BS for Build is all about, is trying new things, trying to learn new things and sharing them with you guys and sharing our process. So I've seen a lot of people use these hot staple guns to hold the pieces of plastic together. So we'll probably grab some staples like this that have really good coverage, put them in the hot staple gun, and basically we're gonna be stapling the two pieces side to side together, and then we'll cut the tails off and add more plastic. Now, after a quick Google search, these bumpers are made out of a whole lot of different things, but it looks like right now, these two, this kit, by the way, just came on Amazon. It's really affordable. I'll put a link in the description. This kit came with all of these different compounds, these plastic compounds for fixing different pieces and parts. And TPO and polypropylene seem to be a mixture of these two things is what bumpers are made out of. So we'll be using these little sticks right here as our filler material in the back side of it, and if we need any filler material in the front side of it before we move on to body fill. The first thing though is to get it really, really strong, and then we also have this mesh here that you can melt into the plastic that adds another layer of security, but I really think that the metal staples are really going to be what we use to do that job. This was freaking cool, man. So that gun worked really, really well. And you can see I just blasted a million staples all the way down that seam. And I accidentally blasted 3 of them a little too hard. So you can see these two just punched completely through, and then this one left a little metal indentation. So I believe for us to be able to body work this properly, we're gonna have to, at least these two obviously have to come out. This one, I don't know, we'll see. It's hard to sand. If you're sanding in a metal, it will sand less than the plastic around it, and it can cause a lot of problems. So I don't like to have any metal high points if we can avoid it. So I'll probably nix this one as well. But overall, I mean, so now this thing is super strong and it's all held together. So now what I'm gonna go ahead and do is I'm gonna probably just like sand into this crack a little bit to leave a bit of a void. Obviously sand up all the paint around here. I'm gonna throw in some plastic weld through here. So I'll plastic weld this back together. And then on the other side, I'm gonna clip all these tails and then follow up with plastic welding through here just to add a little bit more body and structure to all of this. And hopefully it'll end up looking pretty good as far as like our base plastic structure to the body, and then we can start working at body filling it back together. But overall, I mean, this gap it's pretty closed up, it's pretty even, it's pretty smooth looking. I'm very happy with this. This is a cool little tool. And it does plastic welding too, like what a bargain. This came out pretty great. So this thing is like fully repaired, super, super strong now, and it is ready for body filler to just like flatten out and smooth out this surface right here. But that is a great repair. But before I go ahead and do body filler, I want to do the body filler everywhere on this bumper at the same time. So I punched a hole in it here and here. I'm gonna fix this up a little bit right there. There's no real damage there, just needs to be sanded smooth. Those holes are for the body kit, so those will stay. And then bing, bang, boom. This will never be seen, so I might not even fix that. But these guys are a pretty big fix. I'm gonna use metal staples in the back of them just as a backing, and then fill all that stuff with plastic again and sand it smooth like this. And then we'll be ready for the body fill stage where we just go ahead and body fill over all this stuff and sand it smooth. While I've been working on that, Kyle's been flushing in this hood scoop, and the radius is looking really, really great, really smooth. So that is getting very close to being completed. Crazy how much better this bumper looks now that we've even just got a little bit of layer of body filler on there. So that thing, one quick sand away, and that thing is ready to rip. Kyle's got great progress on the hood scoop. That is very, very close to being done. We've just got one more round of body fill sanding to do, and that thing is flushed in. I hope you guys like the look of it. I think it came out really, really good. I mean, it's nice, it's aggressive, and obviously once it's all one color and we have those vents accented, it's gonna look really good. We're getting really, really close to nailing this rendering right here, and that's the whole goal of this build. I think this car looks absolutely amazing, and with this hood scoop, we are a big step closer. Now the goal in this episode was to get us ready for paint. Get us ready so we can paint the car. This part, obviously not quite ready yet. In the next episode, this is gonna be one of the craziest things ever. This is one of the craziest custom parts that we've ever built on a car. We have to relocate the headlight bulbs and the adaptive headlight controls and get this all smooth and pretty looking. It's gonna be a challenge, but oh my gosh, I'm very excited to see what it looks like when it's totally done. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please remember to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. We are like this close to the finale of this build, and it's gonna be so exciting. So please follow along, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace!